Hello, my name is John Rose, and in this video I'd like to take a closer look at AIDS, clean needles, and condoms. And I'm going to start with clean needles because that has to do with drugs, and this video is really a whole lot more about drugs than anything else. So, do we need clean needles when we're doing drugs? Well, obviously, but are the dirty needles the way AIDS is spread? And then how about sexually? Is that why we need the condoms, to not spread this sexually transmitted disease? Do you believe AIDS is sexually transmitted? Do you believe that AIDS is transmitted with dirty needles? Do you believe AIDS in Africa and people are dying from AIDS? If you believe in any of those false beliefs, that's called conventional wisdom, meaning that that belief has been paid for, it's contrived, it's been put into your brain day after day, over and over and over and over. You've been told that lie so many times, you've got way too many references that make you think in the contagion myth, and there's a lot of energy devoted toward maintaining that myth. Because everything in our society of any significance has everything to do with our health. That's why I said medicine is the ultimate tool of control. And socialized medicine is especially the ultimate tool of control because they're forcing us into the system and taking the drugs. And what we have to wake up and realize is this has been going on for a long time, and things aren't going to change unless enough of us wake up and do something about it, and we need to, because most of us don't realize what's going on and how bad it really is. I'm going to digress for a moment. Imagine if somebody was going around and they were kidnapping children, and they were taking them back, and they were taking needles and then putting battery acid in these needles and injecting battery acid into these children. Now, would that make you outraged? Would you want to go out and just rip that person to shreds? How evil can a person be to inject battery acid into a child? Well, wake up, that's what we're doing now. Chemotherapy is almost as hot as battery acid. Battery acid is 10 times hotter. Battery acid is 5,000 times hotter than our blood. Chemotherapy is about 500,000 times hotter than our blood. Why are we allowing this to happen? And again, things aren't changing. Take a look at Dr. Russell Troll's speech back in 1862, where he talked to over 5,000 people at the Smithsonian Institute, most of them politicians, pleading to him, saying, look, we're losing more soldiers in the war because of the drugs that we're giving them. He knew that when a person had a problem, they gave him drugs, they got another problem, they gave him drugs, and went to another problem. He knew that the older physicians all figured that out after a while because they saw what happened. And it was only the younger physicians that were so foolish that they would keep doing that. So, in the speech Russell Troll gave, he points out that he interviewed all these soldiers and said, okay, tell me what happened. He goes, well, it all started out with measles. Okay, that's a disease of poor sanitation. Keep that in mind. So, bad sanitation, bad practices in the war, obviously things are filthy. So that started out with measles. And then he said, well, what happened after that? They said, well, they gave me some drugs for that, and the measles went away, but then I got hemoptysis, spitting out some blood, and gave me some drugs for that, and that went away, and then I got typhoid. So what Dr. Troll proved over and over by asking all these questions, found out that measles goes to hemoptysis and goes to typhoid. Drugs were in between each of those processes. When we give drugs, we know we have side effects. My God, have you never listened to a drug commercial on TV where they talk about the side effects? And isn't it interesting how every one of them just about say flu-like symptoms? Now wait a minute. Flu-like symptoms, isn't that a bacteria? Isn't that a virus? Are they putting bacteria and viruses in all these drugs? Or are drugs in the same group as things that don't belong inside of us, and if we go above the saturation point, we got to get rid of it, and that's what a flu is? I explain what a flu and a cold is in 2 videos. Look down below in the description box. Healing Secrets Revealed and Medicine is the Ultimate Tool of Control. I explain there's 2 short-term self-limited diseases. That's what we're talking about now. When we go above the saturation point, the body's got to let off steam, and the only way the lymph system can get rid of garbage is to back up backwards into the tissues it comes from. So, you can learn more about that if you go to those videos. So again, Troll proved that when you give the drugs, the measles turns into hemoptysis, and that turns into typhoid. Now, if we take a look at T.C. Fry in his book, The Great AIDS Hoax, he explained how the Centers of Disease Control was facing budget cuts in the late 1970s. And they took syphilis and they dismantled it and renamed it. And they've done this before with polio when they renamed it spinal meningitis to skew the numbers. But according to Fry and his research, he said, look what they did. They took the first stage of syphilis and they call it herpes. That's why there are so many new cases of herpes the first year they did this. Because usually there's so many every year, but all of a sudden, boom, there was like the whole bunch of them at one time. And then the second stage, they called it AIDS-related complex. The third stage is AIDS, and the fourth stage is AIDS dementia. And what did they do to these poor people with AIDS in the beginning? They gave them AZT, which is a chemotherapy drug that they didn't use anymore because it was killing too many people. Well, why would they want to give it to people? It's like as if they wanted them to die to reinforce this contagion myth. That's the whole purpose of all of this. It's to reinforce the myth that there are viruses coming in and attacking us. So, what I find interesting about this connection is because this all happened in the late 70s. And T.C. Fry pointed out that you can get a Merrick manual and look before that time period and after time period, and you'll see the exact same words. They didn't change one word, they just changed the names. And I did this, I went back and looked into those books, and that's exactly what they did. They just changed the name and put it into a different category. But what I really like about this story is that Herbert Shelton wrote a book published in 1978, so this is right before all this happened. This is volume 3 of volume 7, The Science and Fine Art of Fasting. And in that book he talks about the value of syphilis in the first two stages is undeniable. It gets rid of it right away. But it doesn't work for the third stage because of the drugs given to them in the first two stages. So again, this is a common ploy. It hasn't changed, and this is what we got to wake up to. Nothing is changing. We're doing the same thing. And now they're kidnapping our children and literally pouring battery acid into them to heal disease in the name of disease. They're giving us drugs that cause more symptoms. It's not the solution for any of our problems. There are no chemical solutions for lifestyle-related problems. There is a contagion element, but not like we think. Anything that comes into us that doesn't belong there is going to be a problem. Anything that we are supposed to get rid of and we can't get rid of, it's going to be a problem. So when they talk about viruses, what most viruses are is just the dead genetic debris of a cell after it dies. And what's left over is the RNA, the DNA, which is telling the cell what to do. Now, I love T.C. Fry's explanation of this. It was quite humorous. He said that what they want us to believe, this was back then when they wrote the book, this is their story. Of course, they change it when people catch on to what they're doing. But T.C. Fry is saying what they want us to believe in this virus theory of disease is that a cell, which is the size of an elephant, is attacked by a virus, which is the size of a flea head. Now, a flea head can't exist by itself, so it's a dead flea head. And what they want us to believe is that this dead piece of DNA, this dead piece of non-living system that doesn't have any type of metabolism, doesn't generate any energy, it is somehow going to attack something the size of an elephant. It's going to force the elephant to reproduce itself. And there's no such thing as self-obligation in nature anywhere. That never happens anywhere. Is that the right word? I don't think I said that right, but anyway, it may come back to me later and I'll correct that. But anyway, there's no such thing as that in nature. Nowhere can a dog make an elephant reproduce. It's ridiculous. And then to have a dead flea head enter into an elephant, make the elephant reproduce a bunch of more dead flea heads, and then according to the theory, and the way T.C. Fry explains it, once that elephant gets about 20,000 dead flea heads, which I think I could probably handle that right there, right? But once it reaches that level, the elephant explodes because of all that pressure, and all those dead flea heads go out and attack more elephants. That's the theory. And what you have to understand is when you see pictures of viruses attacking cells, that's not what's happening. What they're really showing you is a phagocyte attacking a dead piece of DNA. Now, can too much dead genetic debris cause a problem? Of course it can. It can bond to our weaker cells and cause all sorts of havoc, kind of like barnacles on a boat, right? But the question we must ask is, why do we have so much dead genetic debris, and why isn't our body able to clean it up? You see, this is the problem that we have, and that's why there appears to be a contagion element, because we can only handle so much crap inside of us that doesn't belong there, and once it goes above the toleration point, whether it's too much dead genetic debris or some fecal matter that got into us in our food, like food poisoning, or whatever. A drug for whatever symptom you have, more poison in the body, more stuff that doesn't belong there. You go above the saturation point, the waste has got to go somewhere. It's all based on pressure, ionic pressure. Everything goes from high pressure to low pressure. So we can only handle so much pressure inside of our lymph system. Remember, our body's nothing but a bunch of cells and two fluids. One is the blood that brings in the food. It's like the kitchen in a house. The other is the lymph system. That's where the waste goes into. It's like the bathroom. So what happens when the bathroom backs up? It backs up backwards back into the cells. And that's the whole disease process right there. But when you introduce drugs, you introduce a whole new problem because it's damaging things. It's like, again, pouring battery acid, well, let me see, pour battery acid on your flesh and what happens to it? That doesn't belong there, so it's damaging the cells. So a lot of drugs are like pouring battery acid in, especially chemotherapy. And we should be outraged. We should be infuriated that they're doing this to so many people. Look how many cancer cases are going. What's it going to be, like 1.6 million new cancer cases this year, and half of them, or more than half of them, are going to die or something like that. Look how many people are being poisoned to death. All their money is ripped away from them in this process because it's a very costly process. It doesn't work. We got to wake up to this because nothing's changing. It hasn't changed ever since Trawl was warning people about it, and the same thing's happening now. We still use drugs, thinking that's a solution, and it's a lifestyle-related problem. So the biggest problem we have is that we've been lied to. We have a belief system with way too many references that makes us think that AIDS is contagious. That makes us think that there's got to be a chemical solution for this invisible enemy. You see, what the medical people are doing is they want to believe in germs or viruses so that there's an entity and we can attack it. Therefore, we can justify using our weapons. You don't need weapons to fight things that are weapons themselves. You don't fight fire with fire. If you have a tumor in your body, it can range from 3 pH to 5 pH, maybe 6 pH. Yeah, 3 to 6. So if it's 3 pH, that's going to be cancerous if it touches a cell. If it's 6 pH, it's going to be benign because it's not hot enough to damage anything. Cancer is just a damaged cell. And what does chemotherapy do and what does radiation do? It's proven carcinogenic. And we still do this. Come on, let's get organized. Let's stop doing this. Think about how many children are being given chemotherapy today. If someone was running out and kidnapping children and injecting them with battery acid, wouldn't you be outraged? Wouldn't you be up in arms saying, we got to find those guys and get them? We already know who they are. They're right in our face. Get organized. Do something. Stop this insanity now. Why are we allowing it to happen? It's insane. Insane. I'm telling you, my friends, things aren't going to change unless we reach the tipping point. That's why I keep saying over and over and over, a lot of us have got to get our act together to get everyone else's attention. Otherwise, how are we going to fight this monster, the government? We have so many obstacles in our way that are keeping things the way they are. It's a sickness. We're a sick society, and sickness begets sickness. It doesn't have to be. Remember, everything evolves around us being sick, so everything's controlled in that area. Our experts are not our experts. Look what they're doing to us. Damn it all to hell. We got to stop this. Every time another child is given chemotherapy, realize what they're doing to them. How can you sit there and do nothing? Every one of us should be outraged and up in arms. We should be like the mob that runs to the castle and pulls that bastard out of the castle and does whatever they deserve or whatever. I'm not a guy who believes in punishing it. Even the sick people who are doing the things they're doing now, I don't believe that's what we need to do because they're just a reflection of us. Remember, it's like a bell. The bell's got to change. We have a role to play. And it begins by being the best that we can be. It begins by realizing there's a lot of downstream work we have to do. That's not my specialty. My specialty is to get us to go upstream so we can get reconnected and not have to worry about all this downstream stuff. But there's a lot of downstream stuff we need to do, especially when it comes to giving chemotherapy to our children. That's got to stop immediately. We need to put an end to these bureaucracies that are overriding our Constitution. The FDA has got to be dismantled. The Food and Drug Administration has got to be dismantled. These organizations are designed against us. They're not for us. Our government's supposed to be working for us. And now they're controlling us. So we can do a lot of downstream work. And that can help us go upstream. And the point here is that we've just got the wrong mentality. And as long as we have this wrong mentality, the exchange mentality, money's going to rule everything. Money's going to be able to control our educational systems. They're going to be able to control what nutritionists study. So they don't have a clue. They're totally clueless. If you don't understand the disease process, then you don't understand anything about nutrition. And if all you know is the disease process, and you're a pathologist but you don't understand food, then you don't understand anything either. These are the things they don't teach our so-called experts. They are not our experts. We are the experts, and we can prove this to ourselves. All you have to do is go down to the description box below and click on to a seminar that I gave on how to do the first of a 3-step process. Listen to the Dr. Roby interview ahead of time to pump you up. Watch me on the Deborah Junkin Show and look at the transformation these people go through and how excited they are. And when you do this, my friends, I guarantee you, you're in for a treat. Darn it, I cut that off a little prematurely. I wanted to also talk a little bit about hepatitis C and also AIDS in Africa. So I'm going to add this on to it afterwards. First of all, hepatitis C. I've worked with several people with hepatitis C. It's supposed to be caused by a virus, right? Well, 30 days later on a juice fast doing coffee enemas, they're gone. The liver enzymes are normal. So there goes the virus problem. And then AIDS in Africa, people use that as an excuse, saying, well, wait a minute, what about the AIDS in Africa? What about all these people dying in Africa? Well, what we have to understand is that there are 3 things that are killing people in Africa. There's poor sanitation, there's malnutrition, and there's parasitic infection. And those create about 10 different symptoms, and if you have any one of those, you're labeled as having AIDS. So they're not even giving you a test, which is a bogus test to begin with. The ELISA test is not reliable. Plus, it's only identifying whether there are any antibodies and not whether or not there's this so-called virus that is supposedly causing all of our problems. So the AIDS in Africa is a scam. These people are dying because we're disconnected as a species. We're letting it happen. These people are simply starving to death. They're living in filth. And it's a sad reflection on the rest of us that we allow this to happen. Again, we got to wake up to this madness. We're giving chemotherapy to children. We're allowing all these children to die every day on our planet. How can we do that as a species? What is wrong with us? Well, we're disconnected. That's what the first mistake does. It makes us disconnected. And we're so disconnected we end up using chemicals to solve problems. So there are no drug solutions for hepatitis C. I know because I've coached people with hepatitis C. I remember one woman specifically I worked with, she had it for 20 years, done all the other protocols. Within 30 days of drinking juices and doing coffee enemas, her liver enzymes were normal. Worked with another man, similar situation, had it for a long time. And what I found with everybody with hepatitis is mostly they drank a lot of alcohol. So alcohol damages the liver. The liver has to process these poisons. So the problem has to do with drugs. So we see drugs causing hepatitis C. We see drugs causing AIDS. We see drugs causing typhoid. We see the connection there that drugs aren't a solution. And we got to wake up to that. And how do we do it? Once again, go down below, go to my seminar, and when you do this, you're in for a treat. There's one more really interesting story that I failed to mention in this one video, and I've got to tell you about it. And this has to do with this guy named Gentry who came on to a raw food message board back in the end of 2002, and he shared his experience with HIV. He contracted HIV in 1983, and he was already living a pretty healthy lifestyle, and he had a lot of his friends around there were contracting HIV. He was gay, and he saw what was happening when they were doing the AZT, so he knew that wasn't the direction he wanted to go, and he was already living a pretty healthy lifestyle. But he did a little research on this, and he found out about raw foods, and he adopted raw foods, and he changed his diet and didn't have any problems until later when he slipped up and went back to the wrong foods and his symptoms came back. But what was really interesting about Gentry's story is that he helped us understand what was going on in the gay community way back at that time. And he explained something that very few people really understand, is that the gay community were big-time partiers. Not just on the weekend. It wasn't just a little bit of alcohol and a little bit of marijuana or whatever. They did just about everything. They did poppers, they did uppers and downers, they did you name it, they were doing it. And it wasn't just on the weekends, it was every night, over and over and over. Plus they had a lot of sexually transmitted diseases, so they were taking a lot of antibiotics. The point here is they were doing a lot of drugs. That's why the gay community has been inflicted with AIDS, and that's why the IV users are afflicted with AIDS. It has nothing to do with the needle being dirty. It has nothing to do with, oh, they weren't wearing condoms when they were having anal sex. It had everything to do with the dang drugs they were doing. So I've already shown in this video how drugs causes hepatitis C, how it causes AIDS, how it causes typhoid, and that the ultimate solution is not to use more drugs. The ultimate solution is to build up the body and make it strong. Remember what Louis Pasteur said on his deathbed. The microbe is nothing, the terrain is everything. So it's the condition of our body that determines whether or not what we do is going to be a problem. And what's the best thing to do if we've been doing it the wrong way? We'll go down below to the description box below, look at my seminar, and do the first of my 3-step process. And once again, for the 3rd time in this video, when you do this, you're in for a treat.